Greetings, colleagues. This is 240th day of the heroic resistance of Ukraine. I'm Natalia Staroprava. We start our series of briefings at the Mediacentrу Ukraine. We have the authors of the International Art Project joining Ukrainians, Italians, and European artists. So I'd like to give the floor to Edoardo Crisafulli, the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in Ukraine. So tell us, what have you brought to share with us?
First of all, let me thank our ambassador, Pier Francesco Zazzo, who is always supporting Italian culture and the relationship between Italy and Ukraine on a cultural level. During the war, we had to temporarily close our institute in Kyiv, and now we've moved to Lviv. We've been here since July. One of our projects is Geronimo Stilton, comic book, children's literature. This is a project of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, which has been translated into Ukrainian for the first time. It's a booklet for kids, teenagers, focused on the beauties, beautiful locations, museums and stuff in Italy, and we're presenting it in this country and also in Italy to kids, children and refugees. We've done other ambitious projects just a year ago, before this absurd and criminal war, and Sulla Via della Seta exhibition in Kyiv at the Museum of History. And also, this is a very, very dear project to me, Canto dopo Canto, an exhibition. We have a catalogue, Italian and Ukrainian, of course. And the exhibition was held before the war at Khanenko Museum in Kyiv. I know that Khanenko was damaged a few days ago, so we wish to express our solidarity. And last but not least, we've invited Gianluigi Ricuperati, and we're now establishing a very good link and connection with the Ukrainian pavilion, pavilion Ukraine in Triennale di Milano, and he's doing, Gianluigi, a wonderful job, and he illustrated yesterday at the Catholic University, and for sure we will continue with other cultural events on contemporary art, Italian books translated into Ukrainian. We will resume our cooperation with the Molodist International Film Festival, and we will try to bring some Italian films also to Lviv. And of course, our special relationship, I want to emphasize, with your beautiful opera and ballet National Theatre of Lviv, where we held this event devoted to Solomia Krushelnitska, and we had the Italian Festival Pucciniano attending. But today's floor is for our good friend of Ukraine and the prominent writer and curator Gianluigi Ricuperati.
Thank you so much.
Я запрошую до слова Gianluigi Ricuperati.
I'd like to give the floor to Gianluigi Ricuperati, the writer, the project curator. The project is called We Want to Live, and it is planned to begin in 2023. So tell us about the project. What would you like to communicate with it?
First of all, hi to all our Ukrainian sisters and brothers. For me, it's not just a professional or an ideal belief. This is a campaign of being in Ukraine, of supporting Ukraine, both in Italy, in Europe, and here, that has deep family connection, as my wife is Ukrainian and our kids are half Italian, half Ukrainian. So this is very important for me. Yesterday we had a short talk, a conference, not so short actually, that was a sort of anticipation of a bigger project that, thanks to Edoardo Crisafulli and his visionary and very solid and very pragmatic take on the Istituto Italiano di Cultura. I also want to thank all the Italian Institute of Cultures that are so instrumental in helping spreading Italian culture everywhere. So thanks to him, we started presenting a sort of multidisciplinary idea that the idea is to build a bridge between the best, we call it the mavericks of Italian culture and the mavericks of Ukrainian culture. So the most daring artists, writers, architects, photographers, even scientists, like a vision of culture that is broad, is cross-disciplinary. It crosses the boundaries because we are affected by boundaries in a very negative way, but we should trespass boundaries when it comes to thinking, when it comes to art. And yesterday we had a sort of anticipation of what we can do, and we can do it also. I'd like to thank a very good curator that lives in Italy called Sergei Kansedal. He's been the bridge that connected me to the Italian Institute of Culture, and it's really one of the curators of the project. The idea is to, let's say, collaborate, or in a nice way, take over the Teatro dell'Opera, the theater, the opera theater in Lviv, and to make it the place of cross-pollination between the arts. I imagine a festival, a sort of situation in where you occupy very different places in the theater, and you make Ukrainian artists, writers, philosophers, thinkers, and their peers in Italy, each one builds a bridge. And you know, cultural bridges are very different than physical bridges, because physical bridges you can cross it only once you have built them. But cultural bridges is a very poetic thing, because the moment you build it, you can walk. So you're always on the verge of falling down, but you're really making a step, giant steps forward. And that's what we need to do now.
На якому сьогодні етапі
Tell us about the project implementation. Give us more about the different kinds of art you're going to blend in this project.
Well, I can easily think of contemporary art. Yesterday we had a beautiful intervention by Nikita Kadan, a prominent Ukrainian artist that, by the way, was also part of the Triennale Planeta Ukraine pavilion. I wish to say that the Planeta Ukraine is curated by me as well as by my partner Lydia Lieberman and by a wonderful pianist called Anastasia Stofbier. They both live in Italy, as you know. So basically we want to merge contemporary art, architecture, photography. I'd like to bring scientists and physicists. Like, it's very important, the connection between science and humanities, and obviously literature, and obviously also performance art. There is a wonderful idea of bringing an artist that now lives between Switzerland and London. She's called Daria Bloom, and her grandmother was a ballerina, was a dancer at the theater opera in Ukraine, so her ancestors are Ukrainian. And she's doing a fantastic work between performance and self-representation. Let's not forget that this project will have a mostly and proudly feminine participation. So we want to reverse the usual, even though we are two males here speaking, but we want to reverse the usual male dominance of this. So there will be more women than men, and there will be also a representation of all genders, because we really believe in the values of freedom, and because we know that that's and there is no better place than Ukraine now to nurturing the values of freedom and of open society.
такий проєкт він буде реалізований?
Will this project be implemented only in Lviv, or will it be implemented across the other Ukrainian cities as well?
Well, for the moment, Lviv, because it is the diplomatic mission of Italy, has moved to Lviv, it will be the epicenter. But my dear aspiration is to have it, to for sure, to touch other cities. I've been in Ukraine during the first months of war, and I visited Kyiv, and I visited Hostomel, so we've been in touch. I also want to thank personally Miss Galina Grigorenko for all her help. During that trip, that was one of the first trips of non-governmental people in Ukraine. We went with a very diverse group of people, and it was illuminating trip, illuminating visit. So I really wish that we can do something in Kyiv, and I really wish that we can do something in Kharkiv. And I really wish that we can do something also in other cities that maybe are less known to the general public, like Vinica or Ternopil. But I really wish we have to face, obviously, the realities of war, and maybe also Edoardo has something to say about this.
Thank you so much, Gianluigi. Let me clarify that our diplomatic mission is still based in Kyiv, and our ambassador, Pier Francesco Zazzo, never left the country during the war. Simply, we are, as a cultural institute, temporarily located in Lviv, but we're branching out in the whole country. In fact, we organized a concert by famous, renowned artist Simone Onnis, both in the Lviv Theatre, National Theatre of Opera House, let's say, and in the Philharmonia in Kyiv. So definitely our hub, because in order to be operative, it's easier to be based here, but we will branch out in the whole country because I'm still the director of the Culture Institute in Kyiv, absolutely.
That very important specification. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo.
З моменту повномасштабного
Since the full-scale invasion into Ukraine, the Russian enemy has been targeting deliberately the cultural and historic monuments, and many Ukrainian artists, musicians have been afflicted. Many of them have been fighting in the front lines. Some have given their lives. Is this known in Italy, and what is your response to it?
Well, I think that when you want to destroy an identity of a human being, you try to destroy his soul and his body. Culture is one of those human endeavor in which body and soul are intertwined together. So when you destroy a cultural symbol, you also destroy the body of the cultural symbol. So many architectures have been damaged, so many places. Luckily enough, most of the artworks has been secured, and there was a prompt response. But still, this is a criminal and unforgivable murder of souls. And we know it. I'd like to mention a very important initiative by Francesca Thyssen-Bornemisza, that is, and many other people, that is called Museums for Ukraine. We for sure will collaborate with them. I'm pretty sure that we can do something together, because they are being so instrumental in gathering funds and bringing most important directors of contemporary and non-contemporary museums in the world towards the cause of preserving Ukraine's unique cultural heritage. So if the good news is that they tried to kill this soul, but they didn't succeed, and they will never succeed, because the soul of culture, of Ukrainian culture, is also the soul of European culture, and we will all stand in by the cultural museums or institution and by single practitioners of culture. And that's why we are here. That's why we are here. We want to put our bodies where the suffering is, when the danger is. Not because we love danger or sufferings, because as everybody knows, Ukraine is a culture, is all about life. Is all about colors, is all about the beauty of being alive. But because you love life, you know that living life as a prisoner, living life as a slave, is not worth calling it a life. And that's why so many poets, so many young people of talent are dying as soldiers now in Ukraine. And I know the stories of many of them, and I follow them, and I respect them so much. And that's why we are here.
Україна потрапила під
Ukraine is in the focus of Europe in these last 6 months, particularly so when Russia has launched a full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Has Europe noticed Ukrainian art before the war? Is it more noticeable now?
Well, maybe also Edoardo can give his opinion on this. For sure now a lot more has been known. I wish there was other ways to put Ukrainian art and culture on the radar. But still, we have to face reality. For sure, Ukraine is one of the epicenter of the global discourse now. And therefore, Ukrainian culture and art are entering this global discourse. And because some of there are some artists, writers, thinkers, and philosophers, and practitioners of many arts, architects, that are so good, obviously this will blossom, and this will also help people differentiate, which they are already doing, but more and more, this is something that is very important, to differentiate between the enemy, the Russian enemy culture, and Ukrainian culture, because that's one of the weapons that has been, culture has been weaponized by Russians. That's the most horrific thing, because also great writers of the past and musicians have been weaponized, have been used, and this is just another crime on top. So I think that also, I wish that among the list of crimes that sooner or later the military junta, I call it like this because it's a military junta, it's not a democracy, and the president of Russia will face is the attempt to destroy cultural heritage. So it's a crime against humanity. If we are able to transform a crime against cultural heritage as a crime against humanity, I mean, there are so many proofs. They are targeting culture here. So I wish that culture, we are in first line to promote Ukrainian culture elsewhere, and also our culture in Ukraine, because it's one of the things that would be very important to do. And now I'm speaking directly towards the decision makers of the European Union. Why don't we establish an antenna of European Union, or maybe of the cultural institutions of various countries of the EU, here in Leopoli, here in Lviv? Why don't we have a sort of diplomatic cultural mission of the EU? I think that Ursula von der Leyen would be the first in line to say yes to such a project, because Lviv now is a very good, Lviv has been the center of Middle European culture, and it's in the it's perfect for this scope, and we need to do it now. If not, as Primo Levi would say, the great Italian Jewish writer who was the first witness of the concentration camps, if not now, when? Se non ora, quando?
Едуардо, італійці,
Edoardo, what Ukrainian artists are most known in Italy?
This is a question I think you should ask Gianluigi, who's an expert.
Nikita Kanan.
Yeah, for sure, Nikita and others, because I'm not really an expert on Ukrainian art, but for sure I know now there's a new wave of translations of contemporary novelists, so there's a new interest in my field is more literature. Yesterday, an anthology of Ukrainian poetry was discussed, and one of our major publishing houses, Mondadori, is bringing out a collection of young voices, of Ukrainian voices, I think with a parallel text, both Ukrainian and Italian, and this is a very recent project. And so now poets, Ukrainian poets, are in the process of being discovered. A little while ago, we also promoted as a cultural institute a new edition and translation of Shevchenko's poems. Shevchenko, your national poet. And also, we're in close contact with Oksana Pavlovska, who is a scholar of Ukrainian and Italian now, and with whom we are discussing other projects. And she's also the daughter of Lina Kostenko, whose poems have been are in the process of being translated and published. So I know a bit more about literature. On artists, Gianluigi will be in a better position to reply.
Yeah, for sure. We have apart from Nikita Kadan, obviously there is also a very interesting artist and writer called Eugenia Belorusets. She's doing an amazing work between writing visual art, and then obviously there are the all people that maybe not alive now, like Primachenko. A lot of there is a resurging, like an incoming interest on Ukrainian art and culture. And I would also add that we have, as Triennale in Milano, we have published a small booklet called Wings, Le Ali, curated by Lydia Lieberman, the actress that is co-curating the project. And this is a beautiful representation of new voices and old voices of Ukrainian literature. And I make a promise here in the next issue of our magazine, Nova Express, which is in English, so can be read everywhere. We will publish also, thanks to Istituto di Cultura, some of these new voices, and we'll be translating them in English and obviously in their Ukrainian original. So I think that Ukrainian art now is, for me personally, a continent that I'm discovering more and more. Every day I find a new artist, and it's really interesting. And consider also the fact that there are many Ukrainian artists now living in Europe. So there are like flowers blossoming everywhere, and very different inspiration, because obviously art, let's not forget, is not an instrument of propaganda. Art is the instrument of the self-representation of human being. So artists always make embarrassing questions, and that's the power of art. But those embarrassing questions turns out to be the truth in 100 years from now. So as Gerhard Richter, the great German artist, says, one of the greatest artists alive, in 1 or 2 centuries you forget the names of politicians. Maybe you remember Napoleon or something like, or big dictators, but usually you forget all of this. What remains is the history of art, is the artists, the poets, the philosophers.
Для людей, які, можливо,
People who are not artists but interested in art. So what will this project be about, and how can people join it, and how can people experience it, and what is your message?
Well, that's exactly one of the things that we want to do, is have an epicenter of this project, which is the opera theater. And that's why we want to have imagine the opera theater as an open house where you can walk, and in a corner you see a performer artist, and then you see a poet or a poetess reciting their verses, and then you see some singers or musicians. It's a sort of like magic house where different kind of arts are happening almost at the same time. We can imagine 24 hours or maybe 1 week, I don't know. The process, the details are still in the works, but for sure there will be a total openness, and there will be mediators who will help people understand even some of the languages that may be a little bit difficult because they are, let's say, avant-garde sometimes. So this is very important to make art, to respect art, but also to make it intelligible to people. So education is part of this project.
це буде перформанс для
So will it be a performance for the spectators, or will it be an experience for the artist?
It will be for sure a performance for spectators and also for the artist. That's exactly the point. Thank you for the question, because it's exactly a mirror. You know, in the opera house, in the theater of opera, there is this beautiful hall called Mirror Hall. So the idea is to have a mirroring in which artists mirror themselves into spectators and the other way around. So that's exactly the kind of dialogue that we want to promote.
Дякую. З нами були
Thank you. We had Edoardo Crisafulli, the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in Ukraine, and Gianluigi Ricuperati, the writer and curator of the project. Thank you for this meeting. We are looking forward to the implementation of your project quite soon.
нагадую, ми з вами
And we'll be back shortly. Please stay.